Hello again, and welcome back to the Power Podcast. This week we're going to be talking about a very shocking power. I mean, you guys seem pretty static about it, but it's okay. I might have something that might electrify your
Give him the
inspiration.
chair.
Oh, don't worry, guys. I'll give you a spark of inspiration. Uh, I'm running out of these. Please, someone take over from this terrible intro.
Hi, I'm Alex. Welcome to the Power Podcast. We've also got Kane on here.
Yay, spare guest is here.
Yeah.
You say that, although you were our first pick for Electrokinesis because you've actually played with Electrokinesis or electrokinetic powers the longest in any of our Animite Tales test sessions.
You are the Electro Boy.
I am indeed.
This is also, you also came to me with this, and you did actually say this to me multiple times on multiple occasions over multiple years, that that electrokinesis is actually one of your favourite powers, or at least one of your more favoured powers, ones that you would
especially out of the elemental ones it is.
Yeah. Is there any particular reason behind that?
Well, one, I like the aesthetic. I mean, lightning is pretty cool, but two, I think it may not be the most flexible power out of the elements, but I think it's pretty up there considering all things. And I think especially if you're in like a modern era situation or just handle electrokinesis, it's kind of good for combat and out of combat as well.
Well, so I actually have two particular modifiers to this. I'd say that it is one of the best powers, so long, big asterisk here, so long as you can generate electricity, and so long as... What's the best way? So long as you can generate it, and so long as, like, when you generate it, you have some level of control over it, rather than it just firing out of you willy-nilly, you can actually control roughly the location of where the current is going.
Yeah, I mean, if it's random, it's a lot more difficult to use. But I think that's the same with any elemental power, to be fair. But yeah, I think especially with lightning, I mean, let's be honest, it's probably one of, if not close to the baseline, probably most destructive. So I mean, when you're in combat situations, it's a pretty handy power, but it's probably also one of the fastest, if not the fastest element out of the lot. I guess like the only other one, I guess, is if you're comparing it to like aerokinesis, but
I was also going to say, technically, if you also can, I mean, out of the ones that we've talked about, theoretically, lightning is actually considered to be the fastest, considering that lightning moves at a third of the speed of light, which, if I had the actual numbers up, I would tell someone. But yeah, I mean, it is one of the, if not the fastest, main sort of usual element that someone could actually like control or manipulate or have, at their disposal. I'm trying to think. Oh, sorry, go on, Alex.
I would say that it has potential to be very precise, whereas like, all of the other elements and stuff, there is an element of like, with fire, it's like it can spread and everything. And, lightning can like, create fire on its own. But I always tend to think of like electrokinetics as being like precise lightning strikes, actual, actual like real beeline for the main target rather than having collateral, which is scary, but also just more manageable. I think it's just generally more cool.
Surprise! Pinpoint power. I couldn't say the other word, but yeah, it's more destructive in the sense that unlike fire, where it will spread everywhere, it focuses on one thing and utterly demolishes whatever it hits.
Okay, so I was actually completely incorrect at this. It turns out, while flashes we see as a result of lightning strikes travel at the speed of light, But to be fair, that's the equivalent of saying that joke that, most people who can hear technically hear speech at the speed of sound, whereas if you're doing hand signs and hand gestures, technically that means that people can speak at the speed of light if they do hand signs. The idea is that, basically the flash obviously moves at the speed of light. We can perceive it because it's moving at the speed of light. Technically, an actual lightning strike travels nowhere near that, as the speed of light is 670 million miles per hour. A lightning strike is 270,000 miles per hour. Not even. I don't know where I got a third from. It's not even a third. It's maybe not. Well, I don't know if it's an actual keen percentage, but I think it's something around about potentially. Yeah, it's not even a third. But yeah, it's So lightning is still insanely fast. Because nothing that we have in the terms of weapons or transport can even reach that amount. I don't even think a tenth of that speed. Technically not even 100th of that speed. I don't think we have any weapons that can move faster than this. This is ridiculous. But either way, yeah, it is. I'm going to have to disagree with you on the terms of the precision thing, but also I actually have to agree, which is a really weird thing. I do think that it is one of the most precise powers, because fireball might explode upon impact, but I'd say it's actually a lot more precise in one regard, only because of one really odd reason. Lightning can obviously bend around locations, and it can sort of spread out. A lightning strike can actually create a very quick combustion, which basically sort of, hence why sometimes if you ever have it where lightning strikes the ground, it can sometimes make a little explosion because it is just ripping through the air, or the air is ripping apart to a certain extent. But so therefore it technically is relatively precise considering, but at the same time, it's also quite tactical. If I throw a fireball and it hits, in the middle of the room, it then potentially could set on fire to the rest of the room. Lightning, yes, can set fire to things, but at the same time, it's a lot more tactical. You don't try and do an operation with a chainsaw. You use actual surgical equipment, and I think that's sort of the sort of the keen average that lightning, to a certain extent, could be a lot more precise.
Yeah, I think it's the scalpel compared to the chainsaw.
It's also got so much more scariness to it, because again, we often see things in the way of fire has to be a certain heat, whereas lightning, it has a minimum level of heat. If electricity is actually considered as lightning, then it has to be a certain amount of heat in general. And if it strikes something, it's been known to, if it strikes certain metals directly, depending on how many volts were in it at the time, it can melt through steel beams upon a single strike.
I must say, it is kind of very kind of inhuman. We can understand, fire and earth and water and stuff because we have it all around us, most of the time. But lightning is sort of a rare thing that you have to have many conditions to have it. It's just the crackle of it is sort of this isn't our world almost. It's this is we don't know how to handle it. You are some kind of ethereal being, if you understand.
Yeah, it's also one of the basic ones we don't technically need at all. Fire, we need things for food. Water, we need for drinking. Earth is important for growing stuff, and it's the thing we walk on. And obviously, air is quite important. But lightning, by technicality on base concept, has no sort of necessarily need.
If you were out in the middle of the surviving, if you're out in the middle of the woods trying to survive, if suddenly something caught fire, that would be terrifying and terrible. But you could attempt to use some of that stuff that is suddenly burning to help warm you, to help cook things, or even to help use as a weapon against animals. If you have water, so long as it's the right type of water, you can drink it. It can keep you hydrated. It can keep you alive. Earth and rock and ground can be used in multitudes of different ways. For instance, you can use them to build huts. The same with wood, and the same with air, which you use to breathe. Too much of any of these things can kill you, obviously, being burned alive, drowned, or basically hit by a gale force that sends you off spinning into a tornado and you fall to your death. Landslides, landslides, pitfalls and quicksand, like all of these things can kill you. Lightning, on the other hand, if it's a lightning storm or a thunderstorm or whatever you want to call it, there's nothing to do but hope and pray that you are not within, a location that you are obviously going to get struck. And the worst thing is, it is relatively quite a big gamble, because there's also there's no absolute guarantee that you won't be struck by lightning. Because some people have been struck by lightning not during thunderstorms, or at least when they were struck by some of the first bolts of lightning from a thunderstorm, meaning that it just looked like crappy clouds. And there was no rain, and boom, suddenly a guy gets hit by lightning. And it will either kill you or neurologically damage you to a certain point where, like, you could have brain damage, you could have nerve damage, you could have paralysis, you could lose your sight. It could mess you up in a ton of different ways. I mean, yeah, the worst it could do is either kill you or maim you in these different ways. The best it can do for you if you get struck by lightning is maybe destroy an iPod and give you a sick-ass scar. Like, lightning scars are some of the coolest-looking scars. Don't get me wrong. But that is the best-case scenario if you do get hit by lightning. Some person got hit by lightning and stated that he still feels numbness in his fingers 10 years on. There was one guy who got hit by lightning, I think, like 7 times. And also, like, the craziest thing was, there was a guy who got hit by lightning 7 times. But technically, he only got hit 6 times in his life. And then, when he died, a year after he had died, his gravestone got struck by lightning and it broke the gravestone.
I'm sorry, that's like horrible, but like, dude, what do the gods have against this guy?
Either this guy had done something so heinous, or like he was, I don't know, maybe he was one lightning strike away from, like, basically awakening his godlike power. I don't know. Or maybe he really pissed off someone. I don't know. That is such a weird anomaly. And the thing is,
made of metal?
I don't know. Maybe he was a living electromagnet. I don't know. But this is what I mean. Lightning is scary because in situations where, you're in a fire, there are ways to get out of it. In the situations of a flood, there are ways to make sure that it doesn't happen, or the ways to make sure that you prevent it. With thunderstorms, there are certain ways that you can prevent not being in those situations. But, like, say for instance, if I was saying, if you're in your house and a flood occurs, there are still ways that you can make sure that you don't end up dying. In situations where a gale force or a tornado occurs, there are certain ways that you can get out of the way or prevent yourselves from being killed. Same in house fires, and same within earthquakes and landslides. In a thunderstorm, if you are out in the middle of, I don't know, let's say the woods, or out in the middle of the open for miles and miles, there are very little possibilities that you can guarantee your safety. I mean, yeah, there are a huge, like, I think it's like a very tiny possibility that you will be struck. But if you are, as I said before, you don't have the highest chance of survival or the highest chance of getting out of that. So, yeah, I mean, all of these things are terrible and terrifying. But I think that's what partially makes it. And again, just exactly what you said, Kane. It's something that you don't technically need for survival, and it's also not something that you can technically harness. Theoretically, if you are out in the middle of the woods, you couldn't just go, lightning, thank God, I really need to be doing this. There's not really any way that you could harness it. Not only not easily, but also not very well, and the dangers behind it. Whereas, like, fire and
also
stuff.
The thing that pushed us, or helped us push us to
the next stage of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's the thing we didn't need, but it's the thing that helped us achieve greater goals that we couldn't have if we didn't understand it.
And
So
I definitely agree with you on that, by the way. I think that it's quite an interesting thing. Sorry, I'm just trying to get a bottle of water. I think it's quite an interesting thing because one of the it's one of the elements that is both the scariest, but also one of the sort of oddest, because it almost has a form that is naturally untamable. But in the current modern era, we've not only tamed it, we've almost enslaved it to a certain extent. Like I mean, the only way that you guys are currently listening at home to this is because that we have basically got control over the ability to replicate, recreate, and build up electricity to then power our devices, so that then whatever I am saying is being recorded into a microphone.
Aha, but Joe, perhaps it is we who are enslaved by the electronic devices. Have you not thought of that?
No, not at all. But either way, we're getting into this. This is how much I like this element that we haven't even gotten into the usual bit that we talk about at the beginning, which is, what exactly is it? And if you haven't figured it out already, it is the ability, at the minimum, to control telekinetically electricity and electric currents, as well as lightning. Certain other variants of it have the ability to generate electricity, but what are other versions of the powers? What other sort of blue-collar, usual common abilities do you often see with people who have electrokinesis? Kane, I'll go to you. Actually, no, I'll go to Alex first, because I'll see what you've got, because you've probably got some more niche ideas.
Yeah, what with how would I do
like common abilities that people have with electrokinesis or electro-based power.
one of my favorite ones actually is turning yourself, basically into a technopath almost with the power of electricity. So you basically control electronic devices via you're just turning, things on and off, or making them explode, making, generating, or even like reprogramming them with, your electronic abilities. That's I think that's a cool thing. It's like a sort of an overlapping sort of power with technopathy. Like,
Yeah.
Granted it's limited. I mean, if you are like a lightning mimic, you can like, I've seen this a lot in TV shows where you literally can go into, the mainframe, with the power of like cartoon logic, you're like literally in the internet because you're part of it with your electricity and consciousness. But, that's not entirely possible. If you're purely just controlling and not transforming into it, you can still like, play around with it and muck
Okay.
around with things.
So, Kane, what about yourself? Any common feats or abilities that are usually seen with electrokinetics?
normally it's the ability to be faster by some form of means, making yourself faster, whether that's coating yourself with lightning or increasing the speed of which you can process things using lightning to increase the speed of it. That's normally one. Also, sonic stuff is I wouldn't say that's a common thing, but that's sometimes linked to lightning-based users.
Yeah, like the clap of the clap of lightning tearing through the air. You could technically do something where it's like it creates a thunderclap, and obviously, if that's close range to someone, it can hurt their ears or it could shatter glass and stuff like that.
Yeah, using lightning that way. Although I wouldn't say that's exactly common with things, but it tends to be a byproduct most of the time. There's that, and then I would say, obviously, like using it to control metal in a sense, by obviously heating it up and making it flexible, and then using it that way.
Yeah, like electrokinesis, electromagnetism, or even just being able to bend and meld things by basically instilling a large amount of electricity into an object and basically making it more malleable by weakening its structural bonds, and then being able to sort of shape it and meld it because infusing a lot of electricity into it, keeping it inside of that object, keeping it electrified, and then being able to bend and meld it, similar to electromagnetism, or even sort of like electrokinetic object manipulation, or electro-based telekinesis. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I'm trying to think of other. I mean, I'd say those are probably some of the most common.
I'd say one. I don't know if this is very this isn't always the case, but there is one which is electro resistance, or electricity resistance. That can be in there. It's not always too common, but it does exist where certain electrokinetics can have a resistance to it. It often more comes to those who can generate electricity more naturally, rather than having to unlock techniques to summon it, or even have some weird tricky way. Like we were talking a few episodes ago about like aerokinesis and pyrokinesis, having certain ways to be able to force electricity to exist by being able to generate and manipulate heat to the point of which you actually create plasma that then creates sparks and or electricity. Or even with aerokinesis, being able to create such an air pressure that you can actually force or control the direction of lightning. And those abilities would be like, yeah, that's powerful, but if you got struck by lightning, your character in most situations and circumstances wouldn't have a resistance to it. Whereas normally in natural electrokinetics that can generate and absorb it, obviously they have to have some level of resistance to lightning. 3 characters that I'm sort of thinking of at the moment is Static Shock, Black Lightning, and Livewire, all from DC, and they all have electricity-based powers, and they all can control and manipulate different forms of electricity. They all have some kind of resistance or immunity to either their own or other people's lightning. However, I think Black Lightning is the only person that has the ability to harm other electrokinetics, because I think his lightning is different than others. I don't know why, because I don't do enough research, but to be honest, I also don't know.
You're always told, now you know how we feel. You always say, oh, don't research. And it's like, yeah, now you are the one who doesn't know.
The irony is, this is probably one of the only characters that I haven't researched for an episode.
I knew it. It's so you can be more cleverer than me and Sam and have the big brain. It's like, yeah, don't research anything and then secretly you're researching everything.
I research things. I just say you don't have to worry about not researching things because you don't need it.
I mean, you did not say that, but just wait till we get home.
Yeah, you wait, Alex. So those are the usual common things. Obviously, electricity manipulation, electricity resistance, and electricity immunity, those ones are quite common. But some of the different ways that we've been talking about them sort of suddenly made me think, and obviously, I guess we'll sort of go into the next part, which is unique usage, or unique variants, or unique attribute versions of electricity. I'll just go for the usual, obvious, boring one, and just say it's a different colour, and therefore it has a different type of magical property, like Black Lightning in almost every type of anime ever. Having it that, normal lightning users aren't immune to it, and it's also special and extra magic.
Isn't that also in in the Animite Tales where you got different types of lightning as well, mechanically? And it doesn't just look pretty, it has different...
Okay, that's based on science, but it's not actually based on electricity, it's actually based on high and low frequency light. Because in the light spectrum, there are different wavelengths of light. So, red is the slowest spectrum of light, and then, green and white are the sort of, the faster end. Purple as well, sort of being considered to be the lightest and the brightest. But the reason as to why purple is in Animite Tales we have it, the lighter purple lightning is double damage, is purely because that purple is the most common color for electricity and lightning, and it's also usually considered to be purple lightning is higher voltage than white lightning. Considering that white lightning, I don't know why, but white lightning is usually when lightning is first coming out of the clouds. So it's sort of like it's almost like a burst of white light because it's burning through the air. It's cracking and rippling through the air, and it's white hot. But also, anything at such a specific certain degree and temperature becomes white hot. And once something goes white in the terms of heat and light, it is at its fastest acceleration. If that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I learned something new today.
Yeah. I know that there are going to be some people out there who are going to listen to this and go, "Oh, you got it wrong." Yeah, I didn't get the terminology correct. But if you would like to post your dissertation on the spectrums of light, I'm not going to read it, but I will definitely use it as source material, and I'll say, "Yep, they got it right, I got it wrong," but that's roughly what it was based on. Anyway, but. Yeah, so that's my super basic, unique version, because let's be honest, someone was going to say it, and I thought that I'd get the boring one out of the way. So if you had an electrokinetic power, or if you were to write a story, if you were to make a character, or if you were to have some kind of enemy, or whatever, in any kind of story, video game, or even tabletop, and they had to have a lightning, electrokinetic, or an electricity-based power, what kind of unique spin would you put on it? Who would like to go first?
Oh, me.
Okay.
Me. Well, you know how like human beings are also composed of electricity, with electrical kind of forces.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah. With we have like electrical charge, holding all of our molecules together. Again, I don't know the science of it, but I know that the human body, inherently has and uses its own form of electricity.
Yep.
Well, what if you could steal that? Or what if you could control specifically that? Like, you won't be able to take, lightning from the sky or harness it from electronics, but the inherent, electricity within humans, if you could, if you could drain it from them and store it up within you, that would be pretty scary, wouldn't it? That would be pretty fun. Just go into a crowd, just disintegrate people from their very cells, and take power for yourself.
Okay.
Yeah. Or even better, you could revive people as well. Like when someone dies, you could be like a human defibrillator. I mean, you'd have to take someone's electricity first, but hey, kill the bad guy, resurrect the hero.
So I just looked it up for the sake of it. I think it says 70 trillion volts is within a human body, or 3.5 trillion volts, or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Yeah, but I'm going to take it as true because that's a lot of power.
But if that is nuts. Yeah, there are characters that I've seen with that power before. The ability to steal electricity from people. That's quite interesting. What about yourself, Kane? Any unique version or variant of an electro-based power, an electrokinetic-based power?
Oh, unique variant. Oh, I'm trying to think. You could have the really annoying one where you have to generate a thunderstorm to use lightning.
So similar to Storm, where it's like, okay, here's my electrokinesis, and then every time you do it, it makes a thunderstorm above you, sort of thing. It's like, and now I'm gonna hit you with lightning and just falls from the sky.
Or if it's that, or I hate to be this person, it's like weather forecast, where you make like a miniature lightning storm around you.
Oh, so your lightning comes from clouds, but you can make and generate the clouds from just suddenly they apparate and appear.
But you can only make them thunder clouds. But you have to do it that way. You can't just shoot lightning out of your fingers or anything like that.
So
But
if you were to try to do something like that, maybe you'd have to have it where it's like, oh, if this was allowed, you'd have it like you do some kind of like atmosphere based bubble suit where it's like you're just covered in condensed nimbus clouds.
I mean, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But also, because obviously you could also use it as a screen, because obviously thunderclouds tend to be quite dark, because obviously they're because it generates a lot of energy and thus the more water molecules, and thus the cloud gets darker and darker. So you could actually technically use it semi like a smoke screen if you were able to generate a large enough amount of it. Or you obviously you'd be able to just, considering if you were able to make enough, you'd just be able to make a literal storm within like a certain radius, which would also be pretty powerful.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I can definitely see why that could be annoying, because it's like you have to have this huge setup in order to do it. But you gotta admit, much like, Store's powers, that is pretty cool.
I don't know.
Like,
I'd actually,
being able to
after seeing weather forecasts from JoJo's, I actually do have to agree that it would actually be more annoying on everyone else's side.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, oh yeah, I just create a smoke screen, and it's like, but then if they get in the cloud, they're both going to be soaked, and therefore, more susceptible to being, electrocuted. But also, if those clouds store up enough energy, they could be walking into the perfect taser wall. So there's three different ways as to why it's so bad. It is basically a smoke screen. They're going to get absolutely drenched, and then they're going to be electrocuted. And also, it's going to be easier to be electrocuted whilst drenched and whilst in said cloud that they cannot see in.
Yeah, and then obviously it also depends if you're technically resistant to your lightning at all. Because you could, by technicality, have it that you can generate these clouds, but if you ever get touched by a lightning, you're just as harmed as any other person. So
yeah,
it depends how, because all you're doing is, because obviously unlike electrokinetic, the lightning isn't technically coming from you. You're just generating the clouds that then generate the lightning. So you could be cruel and just be like, oh well, you're just like any other person, so you better not get hit by your own lightning. But at the same time, if you are resistant to it, maybe then you'd be able to ride on those clouds if you don't you get electrocuted. But
I mean, it's so pyrotechnic though. It's like really like, I'm like, yeah, it's worth it. Even if I get struck by my own lightning, it's like worth it. This looks awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's the aesthetics, isn't it? Like, just imagine a guy, just a couple of clouds around him, just always like a few little clouds floating around him, and suddenly it's just that thing of like, they can either expand or suddenly like shape different shapes. They could be all sorts of different really weird things. But even crazier is that like, you can use them as weapons, you can use them as smoke screens, you can use them as you can use them as a certain form of disguise to a certain extent. They're so
you technically got transport and flight as well.
If you can have it that they're dense enough, or you can make them dense enough. Yeah, I mean the ability to also increase speed is something that you brought up a while back. Yeah, that's another thing that is very common, as we were talking about it's such a versatile power in the ways that people can see it, rather than how exactly it should or could work. Because obviously,
because most people obviously imagine lightning as using it externally, shooting lightning and whatever that. But if you use it externally, where you actually just use the lightning to increase, if you have like proper electrokinesis, so you can control lightning. If you use it to technically increase your like neuron path, so that thought and process to all around your body can technically increase to a faster rate. Not only can you move your body faster, you might even be able to think faster, because your thoughts would be able to move across your brain quicker.
I mean, potentially. I mean, technically, like this is where we sort of go into the way that we've said it before. Is like theoretically, the science could potentially be supported. At the same time, the science could also be the very thing that sweeps the rug from under it as it face plants into the gravel. Because this is where we obviously have to say it is not. We are not stating that this is the fact of how it would definitely work, because obviously there are many different ways that people use electrokinesis in many different films and shows and cartoons and, anime and video games. There are so many different ways in fiction where this fictional power is used in a fictional universe with its own fictional science. And therefore, we are just talking about the many different ways that it can work, could work, or has worked. And also how interesting it would be if it did work in these different ways. And it's so interesting to think of that and see it that way. Because, again, okay, I have to deal with the fact that this guy has ranged lightning. Oh, well, she now has the ability to move at incredible heightened speeds. Again, if a human could move at again, nearly 300,000 miles per hour without being destroyed by the sheer G-force that would create on their body, and not only have that ability, but to react at that speed, to react at that level, to move at that level, to interpret physical combat at that level of speed, it would be absolutely upsettingly insane. Because nothing could really fight against that without competing it. I think we said this in the Speedster one ages ago. One of the parts about being super fast is it's so unfair, because if you are X, Y, and Z faster than someone, they can't do anything against it. They just can't fight back. By the time that your punch is about to sort of hit their face, they've already struck you several times, moved over halfway around the room, taken a bite of your own bagel, and basically sat down at the table opposite end of the room as you're now about to throw a punch in midair. Time goes back to the way that it's supposed to be, and now you're basically on the floor, covered in puncture wounds or bruises from where you just got hit at the speed of lightning. It's so insane. Range of that power is also incredible, because technically lightning can spread from the clouds to the sky, from the clouds in the sky all the way to the ground, which it really depends on sea level. But that sometimes that's more than a mile distance. And if you have the ability to grab lightning and then chuck it in a specific direction, it could go out at that particular range and that particular distance very well. It's so cool. I mean, there are a few other bonus things that I'll just say about this power is obviously creating solid constructs. I think that it's fine. I allow it because technically it's a plasma, and plasmas can fit into multiple types of categories of solidity into a certain extent.
I mean,
but
it's also like
No,
flight. Technically, it can actually enable flight in a sense, because it is like, yeah, because it's lifting you again. It's sort of a construct, but it's like how lightning sort of moves. It's like you are basically the point of taking it out. I guess it's sort of like in the same way that pyrokinetics can fly, in that it's generating force to lift you upwards. I'm thinking in terms of logic of Electro in Spider-Man.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean,
and other such electrokinetics.
I mean, as I said, lightning constructs, lightning weapons. That's also quite scary. Flight, as you just said. Speed of lightning movement. Lightning based teleportation. If you're a lightning mimic, although it's one of those things. I guess we'll go into this, how it's used in Animite Tales, because I feel like we also need to talk about the balancing of this. Now, we don't have it that lightning has such an insane range as that, because it's a generation and manipulation based power, because the way that we use it is you can generate electricity as well as control out sources of electricity, meaning that, say for instance, if there's a live wire, you can grab some lightning from the live wire, pull it out of it, and then use it as, an attack, instead of having to generate it from your own body. Because of this, you also have a resistance. The resistance is equal to whatever you can dish out at maximum. So if you do a D8, your maximum damage resistance for lightning is 8. And the range is about 20 meters. Which again seems really bad, but that upgrades every single time that you increase damage and increase the I was about to say specifications or specialties. When you increase the levels, or when you start leveling up, you can choose to buff it, and therefore you can increase damage and range together, or you can make different abilities with it. It's quite an odd power, to be honest, because we have two electricity-based powers in Animite Tales. We have lightning mimicry and then electrokinesis. I don't know. I know, Kane. You've only played as a lightning mimic, but technically, when playing as a lightning mimic, you played the closest thing to an electrokinetic, just with some bonus abilities. You've seen how we've built electrokinesis because we sort of came up with a few of the different abilities and perks together.
Oh yeah.
Do you think there's any particular ways that it should be or could be done differently, or even is there anything that you sort of like or dislike about it?
From what I remember of electrokinesis, I mean, I should probably look at the actual thing, but from what I remember, you don't really gain any speed abilities until one of the level 10s.
I think it's level 9 actually, so it's
It's level 9 and level 10. Both of them give you, but you don't get it until basically late end of the power.
Yeah.
I think the other things you get, like the charge up ability at level 3, you get the constructs and weapon constructs at close levels. But yeah, I mean, apart from that, it's very difficult because obviously now with our SPMA system, things that could be perks can also be fit into that, so it kind of plays a weird game. But I think that for the most part, I think they're right, to be fair, in the way they are. But again, I've only really played as one, and that was a while ago, and the system's changed quite a bit since then. So
He's one of my favorite characters, though, in the game.
Oh, a Hawk.
Yeah. The only character with a happy ending of sorts.
Yeah. And maybe at some point we'll have to talk about Hawk again. At some point, the campfire stories will resume, and at some point we'll have to get it.
He has some whack stories.
He does. From fighting and defeating and nearly killing his parents' killer. To going to taking drugs once and then never again, which forced his powers to level up twice. And then he realized never again. All the way to.
That was when he was doing covert, because he was trying to infiltrate the villains that we were tracking.
Yeah,
and I wasn't strong enough to actually beat them, so I was like, well, I'll just join them for a bit.
I'll just join the villains, just see what they're up to.
I took some drugs, and then, I also, that was the same when I started, we had a small civil war for like a couple of sessions.
Yes, where you and another player both realised that killing villains was not a good idea because it's actually just evil, and then Bill's character and then the NPC both went, no, we need to kill him because this guy is evil. We're not evil. We're just finishing them off. And it's like you both are like, no, and so you both like fought each other, like both sides, like 2v2, and I think it was brilliant. That whole thing.
We also came across a random basilisk in a street, but again, this is getting off topic. But
yeah. Either way, but it's that thing of like that's all to come. At some point, we'll sit down and we'll have to do campfire. But yeah, in the terms of the electrokinetic abilities, it in the modern world as well as the non-modern world, as long as you can generate it, it's actually one of the most overpowered abilities ever. Because you were either able to control every single thing around you, because you can grab electricity and suck it up and use it, Like, oh, well, that plasma screen TV, that's using a few volts. I'll take some from there, I'll take some from here, and I'll take some from there, and put it all up into a nice chunky plasma ball and yeet it down the street as it detonates and basically electrifies everything like an EMP, or even like charge it up into one big mighty Zeus bolt and throw it at something, immediately either exploding it or basically like vaporizing something, melting it, depending on it. Or in a non-modern world, you've just now got this thing of, oh my gosh, here comes Lightning Guy, and he basically has the wrath of God in his hands, because again, very little things can actually stop electricity unless if they can defy electricity. Like, for instance, rubber has an incredible resistance, since it doesn't conduct electricity. Rock, although in certain cases, rock can be broken, split apart, and even burn or melted by lightning and electricity. I mean, to be fair, the same can be said about rubber, because, again, in the high enough electricity and enough frequency, it can melt rubber. Although, to be fair, I'd still take my chances with a shield made of rubber than a shield made of rock. Purely because it's easier to lift rubber. But yeah, it's still that thing of, it's just such a terrifying power in any of those settings. And obviously, you've
so funny though, because like you can say because of the rubber resistance, you could be Almighty Zeus and yet get defeated by some rubber gloves.
I mean, I still like the episode in One Piece where Luffy is a rubber man and he goes up against a guy who is hyped for so long as this undefeatable, unkillable god, and you find out that his devil fruit power is it's called the Rumble fruit, which is so dumb, such a dumb name. But he can turn his entire body into, generate and manipulate electricity. And he is basically intangible. He's untouchable by almost any and every single means. No one can hurt him. He then gets punched in the face by the main character, Luffy, because turns out his power of being rubber pretty much guarantees that he can touch him as if he's not got powers, because that's how it works in that form. And I use that as sort of like a little Easter egg. Rubber physiology users can punch lightning mimics and ignore their physical immunity and hit them as if they don't have a physical immunity, because that is the Easter egg that I have for that. There is a lot of ridiculous sort of like weird things about electricity, as well as a lot of ridiculous things that make it OP. I don't know. Are there any things that you guys actually have that you'd like to say about its usage in any of the campaigns you've been in?
Well, one thing I think that this is like what. Unfortunately, it didn't continue. It was a bit of a failed campaign, unfortunately. But I did create an Electrokinesis character that had the ability of electromagnetism.
Yes.
And I basically had, Magneto-esque powers where I could float around on metal objects, by the charge that I created on them. And, I'd basically, I thought it was quite a cool character. And I didn't really get much time. Yeah, I had more fun building them, really, because I built them quite well, I thought, but we never really got to showcase them. But yeah, it was more a case of like maneuvering myself with my powers and having the most speed and like having like the ability to like affect things in my environment rather than actually do damage, although I could do a lot of damage. So I quite like that. It's sort of a heroic character, because like quite a lot of lightning users tend to be on the anti-hero side. I mean, there's only like Static Shock that I can think of at the top of my head, which has that I know is with lightning powers and like that's like truly good.
I'd say Black Lightning, but again, I don't know enough about him. But I'm pretty sure he is actually supposed to be, a good guy.
Yeah, good guy. But it's very like kind of rare, because it's like I can think of like loads of villains, with this power, but like just a handful of like good guys.
I would have to say though, I've seen a lot of really cool ways of using electricity. I've seen a lot of cool ways of using electrokinesis, electric-based magic. And don't get me wrong, every single usage that I've ever seen of electrokinesis are a lot more interesting than the ways that Static Shock uses them. However, in the terms of all around different abilities, consistency in his powers, and also just like sheer likability of the character, I'd still say that Static Shock is probably my favorite electrokinetic character. I know that like technically Azula would potentially count as that, considering she can generate and bend lightning. But even that, no, I still think that.
I mean, even so, you could say that about Zuko because he could do it as well. So if we're going to go by that,
still,
it's like he's my favorite.
Still Static Shock though. Static Shock is still for me. I mean, yeah.
Again, it's like, I mean, I guess I'm just like, I just love it. It's difficult for me because like I pay more attention to the villains. I don't know if you noticed that about me. I like them.
Not at all. I mean, Kane, did you ever get or notice this at all?
No, definitely not.
No. Well done. You've now completely uprooted yourself, Alex. You've made it known to the world.
Oh, myself.
Again. Tis a shame. I'd say, honestly, out of all of the elemental abilities, it's probably one of the most ridiculously OP. It's probably one of my favourites. I don't know if it is my actual favourite, because I still don't know which one my favourite is, which I think we're going to go through all of the ones that we're actually going to list off as a Power Podcast one before I actually give my final answer as what my favourite is. In the terms of what you would pair it with, I'm going to ask this question. What would you pair electrokinesis with if you could pair it with one other power?
Actually, I would, well, in terms of the Animite Tales, I would pair it with Terrakinesis for a number of reasons. First
Vessel
of all,
manipulation and electromagnetism?
Not just that, actually. Like, not just that, I would have that, but also, like, if you weren't going to go the metal manipulation route, you could actually have it so that you ground people with your light. If you're going to do special attacks, it's like that would get rid of the whole, collateral damage side of things. If you're doing like a big attack, it's just sort of like, oh god, I've got to go all out. But there's so many civilians surrounding me, man. I better like ground them and stuff. So if they do get hit in this horrible storm, like they can at least survive it. That would be my tactics.
Okay.
For that.
I'd say if I was to do that, it's actually quite funny because the way that we have it in Animite Tales is that the level 10s, you either have the evolutions or the mutations, and both of the evolutions in that are quite interesting because you've got Saint Elmo's Aura, which if no one actually knows if no one actually knows what that means, look up Saint Elmo's Fire, and you'll sort of know what we're going for here. But it's basically just a reference to in the times of like sort of naval. Basically, in sort of like the Napoleonic times, during thunderstorms, they'd see lightning spark off the edge of certain like ballasts, and the things that held the sails. I can never remember what they're called, but the things that held the sails, there'd be like metal rigging on it, and they'd sort of spark off electricity, and it would almost sometimes look like a cross. Of electricity, and they would call it Saint Elmo's Fire. And in this game, we call it Saint Elmo's Aura. And the whole concept is the user generates electricity, covers themselves in it, and it basically acts as like some kind of like energy stockpile of electricity, giving them armor, increase of speed, and also increase of power, as it's like some kind of stockpile. We then have, on the evolution side of Terrakinesis, we actually have Terran Sphere, which absorbs energy from the terrakinetic fields, basically meaning that like any damage or any disturbance in the kinetic energy that is pushed into the Earth, meaning like when rocks are moved, when pressure is placed into it, when vibrations are pushed into the ground, all of those vibrations are then taken and then absorbed into the user of this power. And the reason why it's called Terran Sphere is because it's anything within a specific radius of the user, almost like a sphere that is absorbing the energy and giving it all to whoever the user of that power is. So you have two stockpiling powers, and it's like, okay, well, now I am immune to lightning because any lightning will just be absorbed into this aura. And then you then have this thing of all terrakinetic power, all damage, where someone's getting slammed against the earth every time that I use terrakinesis, all that damage is then being absorbed right back into this stockpile. And eventually you could just do this massive AoE attack, where you use all of the power behind it, and all of the power of the lightning, if you had balance, at one big shot, and just completely wipe out someone. So, yeah, that's quite an interesting way of doing it. You could either have the metal manipulation one, where you have complete control of, metal and magnetism, or you can have the opposite, where it's like all power over earth and all power over lightning. The earth and sky are mine to control.
I am Almighty Zeus!
What about yourself, Kane? If you were to put another power with electrokinesis or something like that, what would you put with it?
I mean, obviously, aerokinesis would be an interesting one. But I was also thinking sound would be quite interesting, considering if you get the level 10, which basically means that any sound that is basically generated, you can just have damage come from that.
I
mean, lightning is
you
probably
were looking at this.
So lightning is basically, it's basically the loudest element. So you basically just keep creating a ridiculous amount of noise, which then just continuously does damage. So you can just demolish your opponents, not even with the lightning, but just the sound that it makes.
I like the idea. I like the idea
of your Hydro.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say Hydra would be an interesting one. Either if you got complete liquid control or if you got temperature manipulation. Because technically, if you had a large, this would probably be better with chemistry, but if you somehow managed to get a large enough range with temperature manipulation or water temperature manipulation, if you're able to affect the clouds of your range, then you would be able to just cause them to start generating lightning, which would mean you'd be able to just make natural thunderstorms and thus be able to control all that lightning.
That is true, yeah.
But that's a really far off one. But you'd have to be able to actually affect the clouds, and they're pretty damn high. So,
fair enough.
I don't know about that one.
I was actually going to say,
but obviously, water as well. It's just a good combo.
Water and lightning. As we said previously, if you make someone wet before you then electrocute them, and it's like they're saturated, and then boom, they're going to take a lot more damage from electricity. As the entire, they suddenly become a lot easier to be able to electrocute. I was actually going to say, what is it? Oh my gosh, what is it? There's a very specific. There's a very specific thing that I was going to say about the lightning and sound one. I know that you were eyeing that up at one point, and the reason I like that is just like, I have lightning and sound, and it's that thing of like, even if someone is a mimic of lightning, or someone who has a stupidly high resistance of lightning, and it's like, I'm immune to lightning, throwing that first lightning bolt, and then just going, I won't even bother moving, I'll take it. And what they don't realise is that you've amplified the sound of this lightning bolt, so when they get hit, they're going to take sonic damage equal to or greater than the actual lightning. So they get hit by the lightning, and just the sheer sound of it smashing against them will basically cause such a massive ripple of sound vibrations that it could potentially either deafen or just straight up kill them in such a way, because it would almost entirely tear them apart from that sound alone. And even if it doesn't instantly kill them, it'll make them think twice about ever getting hit by one of your attacks again. And as we already know, certain forms of lightning and electricity are loud, but even scarier is if you have a good enough range with your sound manipulation, all you need to do is make them generate the lightning, And it's like, okay, the second that makes a thunderclap, boom, it makes a thunderclap this loud from your hand or from wherever you're generating it from, and then bam, you're suddenly taking a huge amount of damage just from firing off your own attack. So
yeah, another scary one is if you take science manipulation, which means you can make an area where you can't be seen or can't be heard. Sorry. Which
silence
means
manipulation.
which means apart from the light, if they don't see it coming, they're gonna get hit by it because they won't even be able to hear it.
It also doesn't help because sound moves at like 300 or 700 miles per hour, and as we've already stated, lightning moves at a good, multiple thousands more than that, and and it's that thing of like, even if you were trying to be stealthy, it doesn't matter. I mean, it would be good as long as they didn't notice the light, it would be good for stealth, I guess, because like this thing of like my only string to my bow is throwing lightning. So if I can just make it silent, it would really do me a solid, because lightning is, as you said, one of the loudest, if not the loudest
if you
elements.
sneak up to them and touch them and start electrocuting them, no one else is going to hear them slowly being electrocuted.
Tased,
so,
yeah.
So it's like
fair enough.
It's
Yeah.
I think those are the main ones.
Oh, I've got another one as well. With sound, what about light? Like photonic empowerment and stuff, like generating. You basically just be creating your own light source.
Well, yes, that is true.
I think energy beam manipulation would be better with that, because if you get light refractant, you can literally turn invisible, and then if you have, obviously, science manipulation, you can literally also be soundless, so no one can see you and no one can hear you.
I actually have something to say about light refraction. I actually was trying to tell someone this, because I think it was Sam or someone said I'd go for energy beam manipulation and thingy, and then I'll make myself invisible and then stealthily absorb light, and I'm like, if you do light refraction, you're bending light around you, therefore meaning it cannot get into your body, into your skin, therefore your power can't absorb the light. It was like, oh, I don't know, it kind of makes sense. And I was like, yeah, I mean, someone might allow it, but I personally, because I like the idea of that thing of like, you're either invisible or you can absorb light. You won't be able to do both because you're bending light around you, therefore meaning that it can't get in.
I mean, another one, I don't know if electrokinesis would be better with sound manipulation, or if living lightning would be better with sound manipulation.
I think either would work good. I was actually going to say for my one, I was going to say, what was it? Lightning is really good with almost any ability. I was actually going to say, I'll go for the boring answer, because I went for the boring answer last time, so I feel like it's kind of almost my duty to be the boring one. Which was pyrokinesis, purely because fire and lightning putting together, you can have plasma, meaning that like it's a fire that burns incredibly hot, but it also basically means that not only can it melt things really bloody quickly, it can also have electronic frequencies that can mess with other electric frequencies. So it's like you get hit by this flame that just is burning through anything, like as if it can burn through steel instantly, because obviously plasma cutters, but also if it hits certain electronic objects, it can also mess up the electronics in that object, or even like other electric frequencies. But on top of all of that, plasma burners can also be used underwater, therefore neutralizing both of the power's weaknesses, because electricity just spreads out everywhere in water, and fire is put out in water. Combining the two gets rid of both of their weakness to water in total. I mean, although it does mean that it doesn't spread through water, but it also means that it isn't put out or suddenly dispersed in water. So again, quite like that idea. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of an interesting sort of flavour, but it also gives you two different types of powers to work with. If I was to go with any of the other ones, I'd go, chemistry maybe. That would be interesting. Effigy animation, create an entire being made out of lightning. Suddenly slap on some semi-sentience to it, and therefore you've now got a walking being of lightning. Or obviously, what's it called? Oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of it. Intangibility. Because obviously, like, basically being untouchable, facing through places, and then as you were saying, like the whole stealth thing where like you sneak up behind someone and electrocute them. Imagine being able to like pass through walls and just grab someone, tase them, and then just suddenly disappear into a wall again. It's that thing of like I am the stealth taser. They call me the taser ghost. I think there's a multitude of different ways that can be used. Telepathy and technopathy. Again, as you said, Alex, at the beginning of this, controlling stuff and going into data, or at least controlling data using electrokinesis and technopathy, being able to control stuff, being able to actually power things, like not only having it that like you could technically have it was like, oh, my phone isn't a smartphone, and it's like, yeah, just give it to me. Yeah, the battery's dead. No, it isn't. And then you just hold it, and you are not only the charger, like a wireless charger, but you're also basically just using telepathy to operate all of the operation systems without needing to press any of their buttons. It gives you a ton of different things to use in multitudes of things. Oh no, the keypad is broken. Oh no, the screen is broken. Well, it doesn't matter. I can do this, that, and the other, and I can still operate it to a certain extent. Even basically like forcing electricity through all of the different parts and components, and then having technopathy to be able to run the software, or even basically use all of the different things to basically make your thoughts be the software to a certain extent. I think we've almost covered everything that we can within the hour, but I think we've also stated that like it is a can of worms, this power, because it is so. It's such a vast power. There are so many ways that we can look at it. Any last closing comments from either of you?
Electricity, good. Good electricity. I am caveman. I fear it. I hide in cave away from it.
I mean, it's not like fire where you can make food with it. Well, depending.
I mean, yeah, with the microwave, but as a caveman, as a proud, owner of a cave, technology frightens me, and I have nothing to do with it.
Okay,
understandable.
What about yourself? Any comments on electrokinesis or electricity based powers before we head off?
They're pretty cool. Pretty cool, my dude. And yeah, no, they're definitely one of my favorites. I also think, not the most flexible, but I think it's pretty flexible in the way it can be used.
I think it's quite difficult to look at flexibility with a power that is literally based on being able to manipulate it, because there's a lot of arguments for it. However, I'd actually argue that it is the most flexible manipulation-based power other than telekinesis. And to be fair, that's not fair, because telekinesis is the omnikinetic power, so... But I like the idea of it, because if you have a resistance to electricity, you can increase your speed. In some cases, people can use it to fly. You can use it to download stuff, control electronics. You can have it for attacks. You can have it for using defibrillation to restart people's hearts. You can take away people's electoral fields, meaning that you can actually technically absorb like the very thing that keeps their brains functioning. You can do many things with it that aren't just kill, and there are many different things that you can do with it that aren't just generate electricity. You can also manipulate the electricity in your own body, increase the amount of electricity in your own body, and again, if your body has a certain resistance to it, it might actually mean that you are your brain processes are increased. Technically, that's not how it works, but that could be how it works in a fictional universe with a fictional power. But again, unlike pyrokinesis, this power has a lot more things at home, because we have certain amounts of electricity coursing through our bodies. That's probably why it feels so much more at home. And then you've got like fire, where you can heat stuff and you can cook stuff and you can burn stuff, but it's like that has its limits. Electricity, when you're looking at it in different ways and exaggerating the different ways that it can be used, you're then going, oh, well, it can also give super speed. It can give super thought processing, and so on and so forth. So yeah, its flexibility, I would argue, is probably the most flexible out of all of the ones that we've talked about, and that includes cryokinesis and aerokinesis. Two of some of the most flexible manipulation powers, I would argue. So I'd have to agree with you. It's one of the most flexible. It's not the most flexible power, but to be fair, I still think that in the category list that we've given off it over the last few, elemental kinetic powers, I'd argue that it is the most flexible one that we've seen so far on the Power Podcast. In terms of how you can use it, anyway.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're pretty much sorted now. Thank you both of you for joining again. It's been an interesting journey, this one.
Yeah, you can. That's a way to put it, I guess.
It's been electrifying.
I was waiting for it. I'm about to say that's shocking.
Yeah. There's something wrong with.
Pun.
There's something wrong with the lightning in my room. I mean, the lighting in my room.
Not doing yourself any favors.
No, I'm not. I'm really not. Well, this is also one of the most powerful ones that we've done in a while as well, because I know that I argued last week about how dangerous the power of cold is, but again, like a single bolt of lightning, the amount of volts that has to be in a single bolt of lightning to be considered a bolt of lightning is scary. And also,
we had so little to talk about really because it's kind of just perfect the way it is. Really, like there's no sort of like upping it, to be honest.
I've actually heard people call electrokinesis or electro, generation one note, and to some degree it can be, but heck, so can almost all of the others. Pyrokinesis, you could
depends how you use it.
Yeah, well, it's also depending on what limitations that person has been given. Similar to the guy from My Hero Academia, Kaminari, he can only generate electricity and absorb electricity. He can't control what it's shaped like. Heck, sometimes, if not all the time, he can't even control how it goes out. He can control how much goes out and how much can go in, but not how it goes out. So, a power can be one note if it's made one note. It just really depends. Either way, it's been an interesting episode. Thank you to any of those who have been listening to this Power Podcast, and of course, if you like more of this kind of content, why don't you check out the Animite Tales YouTube channel, where we have many different things, such as these podcasts, Campfire Stories, where we talk to a few different guests about their stories in tabletop RPGs, characters that they've played as, or even games that they'd like to discuss about. We also have the Animite Tales dev plays, where we develop, playtest the game known as Animite Tales. If you'd like to stick around for those, definitely like and subscribe, and hit that bell, I guess, if you want notifications. No big deal or whatever. It's just I'll be really upset.
Wouldn't kill you, would it?
And of course, I'm at Animite Tales on Twitter. So why don't you come check me out? Definitely don't check out at Obscuracom, who already has 1,000 followers.
Yeah, I don't want to hear from you, frankly.
They've gotten too famous already, whoever they are.
Yes. Oh, the burden of being loved.
Do you know what? You sound a lot like Bill when he's trying to explain how bad his characters are, and he's like, "Oh, I've just got so many abilities, guys. You just don't understand. Oh, my stat block is so
It's quite
perfect."
understandable, really. To be fair, I understand his.
I know you do because you've been in the same situation.
I must say, I'm getting there now with Rakia because I've got so many things. I've literally got 3 pages worth of stuff to remember now, and it's like, oh, it's so hard.
If you want to know who Rakia is, check out the Crucible of Avarice campaign, which is based around a tournament setting. Thank you very much for listening, and as always, take care and have a wonderful night.
What?
Oh yeah, I forgot that Kane doesn't have any sign out
No,
catchphrase.
no, it's just silence. That's all they get. The silent treatment.
Fair enough. Ciao, ciao for now.